Now welcome to another Let's Talk Some Star Wars, where this time we'll be taking a look at and discussing the results of the poll that asked, after the new trailer, how are you feeling about the Acolyte? I'll then of course be reading and responding to some of the comments left on the poll. And so let's right away get to those results, where we'll see that only 4% of people said it looks awesome and or that they can't wait for it. 10% then said it looks pretty good and or they're looking forward to it. 26% said it looks alright and they'll probably be watching it, which left 33% to say it doesn't look that good and or I probably won't watch it, and a final 28% to say it looks awful and there's no way I'll watch that crap. Alright, and this is the part of the show where I usually point out how these results could be somewhat skewed or biased because obviously people who watch or follow my channel are tending to have the same kind of viewpoint as me, and I have not been the most positive towards the Disney Star Wars in general or towards this show in particular. There were even some comments that pointed out a few other channels have done very similar polls and had better results, though those channels tend to be very positive towards Disney Star Wars as far as I know or have been told, and thus not too surprising that they would have, of course, better results, though even their results haven't been overwhelmingly positive, shall we say. And then when we look at the trailer, and at the time of recording this Sunday morning, we see that it has 174,000 upvotes to 469,000 downvotes, which is almost 500,000 people who have clicked on this and voted down, who do not like it. Though of course there may be some bots, there may be people with multiple accounts. We have no way of knowing just how accurate these numbers are. Nevertheless, that's pretty terrible, and it's not like there are apparently people trying to counteract this on the other side. It's not like there are people making bot accounts to thumbs it up or making multiple accounts or whatever it might be. And so, for better or worse, right or wrong, considering it's just a trailer, seems like a lot of people are down on the Acolyte. So my poll results seem to kind of reflect the community as a whole, I would say. In fact, if you really kind of math this out, my poll tends to be more positive than the results on the trailer itself. But anyway, let's move on, and before we do, let me just say thank you to everybody who votes, comments, and watches these or any of my videos, and a big thanks to those who take the time to leave a comment. There are generally hundreds, if not sometimes thousands of them, so obviously not everyone is going to make the video. Though I do read them all, I do appreciate them all, and I do love the insight into the fandom, so thank you again in particular to those who leave the comments. Also a huge thank you to those who support my channels over on Patreon, thank you so much for that. And now let's once again kick this off with the top rated comment, which this time came to us from Benjamin Prabilski, who simply said, "Didn't watch, don't care." And as I always try to point out with polls like these that tend to skew more negative than positive, and there will always be people in the comments or elsewhere that are like, well, who cares what the haters have to say? I like it, which is great. You can enjoy it all you want. I think that's awesome that you are enjoying Disney Star Wars. But you have to keep in mind, if you are getting my poll in your feed, you're probably a pretty big Star Wars fan. And so that so many people don't care about what Disney is doing, that should be alarming, not necessarily to you personally, but certainly to Disney. They have to look at these numbers on the trailer. They have to look at numbers on polls like mine, not necessarily my poll, but you know what I mean. And it has to be concerning. They have to be asking themselves behind the scenes, what are we doing wrong? Or so you'd at least like to hope they are. Anytime your customer base is unhappy with what you are doing, you should really be questioning what you're doing. But anyway, let's now move on to this comment from Content Corsair, who said, "Honestly, the trailer itself looks cool. However, I have been misled one too many times with good trailers for bad products, and lots of the creatives on this show are major red flags. I'll probably follow this show at least to see what the reaction is, but watching all the way through is by no means guaranteed." And certainly part of the skepticism or downright dislike of this show already has a lot to do with their track record at this point, with other shows that have not delivered even after pretty cool looking trailers. And I would argue, out of context, take everything away and you just show this trailer to somebody, or if you go back in time 10 years or before the sequels and you showed somebody this trailer and said this is what a Star Wars show is going to look like, before we had any idea what Disney Star Wars was going to be, I'd argue most people would probably watch that and think it's pretty cool or pretty good. And I know some are going to say, no, it looks like trash, or it looks low quality, it looks like this or that. And sure, maybe you do indeed feel that way. But I think many who say that have no doubt been influenced by Disney Star Wars and just know usually what the end result looks like, that more often than not, the trailers are the best part of a show. And yeah, another time, another place, different circumstances. I think this trailer, for the most part, there are some issues with the trailer or things said in it, which we are about to get to. But I think taken out of context, most people would actually really have enjoyed this trailer. Alright, that then brings us to this comment from Zach, who said, "This isn't about good or bad. My brother in the Force, that is the whole point." And yeah, I do think if you could say, ask George Lucas to describe what Star Wars is about in 10 words or less, he would probably go with something along the lines of it's about good versus evil, or right versus wrong, or making the right choices versus the wrong ones, or being selfish versus selfless. Which isn't to say you can't have any nuance in those questions or anything like that. Just look at the opening crawl of Revenge of the Sith, where it says there are heroes on both sides. His point being that no, war and conflict are not always so clear-cut good versus evil or right versus wrong or whatever. However, when we are talking about the Sith, I think you want to be very careful about in any way, shape, or form either justifying them or making them sympathetic somehow. We are talking about the very epitome of selfishness and hate. They are so selfish they will kill anyone who has more power than them or more stuff than them, basically because they can't help themselves. They just are that selfish. It's why there could only ever be two, one who has the power and the other one who wants it or will eventually die trying to get it. And so again, you want to be very careful about trying to say, well, the Jedi way, the selfless way, is wrong somehow, and it leads to the creation of the Sith, and that's okay to have these very selfish individuals in the galaxy. We somehow need that in the galaxy, which is just ridiculous. As I have tried to point out many times before, balance in Star Wars is more about harmony. It's more about a system working as intended. Instead of thinking about it as a scale with two sides balanced out, think about it as the human body. Does a human body need as much sickness as it does health? Does a society need as much crime as it does law-abiding citizens? Of course not. In both cases, we would consider harmony or balance to be no sickness or no crime. It's kind of the same thing with Star Wars. You don't need people using the dark side. But anyway, I have gone over all this before, so let's move on to this comment from Dr. Spectrum, who said, "Trailer showed practically nothing, but I'm curious about the setting and time period, so we'll check it out. My expectations are very low, however." And you know, I actually think that the time period that this takes place in, which is 100 years before the prequels, that it might be to the show's detriment in a way. Because when you tell the casual fan or the normie that something takes place 100 years before the prequels, that doesn't really mean anything to them. There's really no context for them to grab onto and get excited about. It's not like saying this is right after Return of the Jedi or something like that, something they very much know and understand. And the few people that I have had ask me about this show and when it takes place and all of that, and they're not hardcore fans by any stretch, kind of the more casual fan, and I say 100 years before the prequels, the look is kind of like, oh, why is that? Like, what happens at this point? And they're not asking because they're generally excited. They're just asking, like, why would you put a show at this point in time? Like, what is going to go on to justify telling a story in this period? And sure, for some, all you got to do is put some lightsabers in a trailer, and that will be enough to get them excited or want to check it out. And speaking of that sort of thing, we now have a comment from Honest Soul, who said, "I'm willing to bet money there's going to be a 2-minute Yoda cameo that's going to have half the fandom saying, 'This is the best thing to happen in Star Wars in years.'" And yeah, I could certainly see something along those lines happening, and quite honestly, I would be more surprised not to get a Yoda cameo than I would be to get one. I think it's almost a given he's going to be in there somewhere. How much? I don't know. I don't think it'll be much. I do think 2 minutes might be about it. Though at the same time, it would make sense, theoretically, to see him. He is, of course, around and doing his thing at this point in time. He has been in the books and comics of the High Republic era. And so, yeah, it would make sense to see Yoda, who is in charge of the council at this time. I don't think that would be a problem, though I do agree that him showing up is probably enough to get some fans out there to just get really excited by simply seeing him on screen, which is something I kind of get. I get being excited about your favorite character, yet at the same time, I think you should have a little bit of higher standards, shall we say? You shouldn't just fall for the low-hanging fruit, essentially. Anyway, let's move on to this comment from Leanna, who said, "I find it absolutely horrendous that they're claiming to market this to children when we know that there is sexual content. As a parent, there is absolutely no way I would allow my children to watch the show." And quite honestly, we don't know that there is going to be sexual content in this. In fact, I would be pretty surprised if there is. Even Andor, which was certainly a more adult-oriented show, it only had implied sexual content at one point. And so I don't really see this show changing that. I don't think Star Wars is ever going to have like true, real sexual content in it. Maybe if they someday make an R-rated show, I don't know, and very clearly market it towards adults. Because even though I don't know that this is like marketed towards children, especially with the first kind of poster showing us the blood smear with the lightsaber, which kind of tells adults, hey, maybe you're not going to want your kids to watch this, or you're going to want to watch it with them. Even though I would also argue that for a lot of people, Star Wars is kind of synonymous with for kids television or movies. And so if you are going to have a little more risque content in one way or another, you would definitely want to make it very clear to parents. But anyway, before I ramble on, I don't think there's going to be sexual content in this. I don't know where you have heard that it is like gonna happen. Maybe some other channels out there are saying that, but no. I would be very, very surprised if we get any legitimate sex scenes in this or anything too explicit in general. I don't think Disney ever really wants Star Wars to go that far with things, but hey, what do I know? Alright, moving on now, we have a comment from Red Stratus 97 who said, 2 words, cautiously optimistic. And I think that is a fair way to approach this series. As for myself, I am going into it open-minded. I am prepared for the worst, but hoping for the best. If it turns out I enjoy the 2-episode premiere, if I think it is really good, well then my first review for it will be positive. I will say as much, despite the fact many out there have probably already made up their mind and are not going to appreciate me being positive towards it. But I am here to be fair. I am not just here to pitch a singular narrative because I have decided I am in this camp or that. I hope that is what people appreciate about me, that I am not biased one way or the other, or I try not to be. I just give you my opinion, and then it is up to you to take it or leave it for what it is. Alright, and final comment here comes from Blue Diamond Director, who said, I'm pretty much in Star Wars now for Andor Season 2 and the 3rd Jedi game at this point. Sad times. And yeah, I certainly understand that perspective. I am very much looking forward to Andor Season 2 and the final game, or what I assume is the final game in the Jedi series, though I'm also enjoying Bad Batch Season 3 right now. I think the show has been good from the start, not always great, but certainly good, and this 3rd season has been on point and seems to be building to a pretty cool or epic finale. We'll have to wait and see. But yeah, it is pretty sad times that shows like The Acolyte, which in theory sounds like it could be interesting, minus some of the things we've heard and minus maybe not liking the person behind creating it. But it's sad that we are sitting here anticipating things with dread instead of excitement. As I've said so many times before, there is nothing I would love more than to see them turn Star Wars around, or for in a dream scenario, they sell it to someone else who gets it right. Whatever the case might be, clean house, get rid of Kennedy. I don't know what the solution necessarily is. But whatever it is, I hope they find it. I hope they can repair some of this damage to the fandom. And I hope we can anticipate shows with excitement again. We can watch trailers and get excited and vote thumbs up and discuss them and theorize about them instead of, again, approaching them with such dread. Well, that's all I got for you this time. Now it is your turn to take to the comments below and tell me what you think about The Acolyte. How excited are you or are you not for this? Whatever the case may be, leave those comments below. Let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.